Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to Chapter 5. Today, Mark and I are going to discuss content management systems. Mark, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Jim, and we sure are going to talk about CMS and everything to do with it. Looking forward to it.
Let's jump right in.
Okay, let's have at it.
Let's jump into the CMS problem. Typically, out of the gate, CMS systems don't understand engagement, but we need our CMS systems to deliver against sentiment. So, Mark, tell us how you would bridge the gap.
Well, I mean, the central challenge with CMSs is that they are not meant to understand engagement in the context of marketing, right? And what we mean by that is that they are there to serve content, and it's a kind of fire and forget mode or model of operating. Yet we live in a world that is increasingly measured by sentiment, right? How are people feeling? What are they intending on doing? What is it that they're thinking of looking at? And the only gauge that we really have by that is how much they're engaging with the content that we have. So the question really becomes like, okay, how do we bridge the gap in between serving content and actually understanding what's happening, how that content is being used?
Exactly, like the amount of time people spend reviewing a piece of content, for example, or scrolling.
Well, time could be one factor, sure. But I mean, think about a podcast, right? I mean, you can adjust the speed by which you listen to a podcast. So you could listen to it at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times or whatever it may be. People read faster than some other people, depending what's going on. So time is a factor, but also depth is more of a factor.
Let's dig a little bit deeper. So basically, do you believe that some CMS systems fall short today? For example, how do we get to who is consuming what and why? And more importantly, how do we personalize pages at scale? And what I mean by that is every page ultimately should be unique to every single user.
Regarding the first question in terms of, do CMSs fall short? I don't think so. I just don't think that they've also been positioned as a central part of the story in an engagement model for a marketing organization anyways, in terms of being able to measure or capture interactivity with them, primarily because they're not built to, right? I mean, that's just, keep that as a first principle. However, it is really important to layer on interaction around them so you can understand how people are engaging with it, so you can get to the point where you are personalizing at scale. And not just personalizing a page, but personalizing the stuff inside the page for the person or a component thereof. And this could also apply to a document. This could apply to a set of images or a series of sound bites, etc. So I think it's more about them not falling short in that they also haven't been positioned in the engagement side of the economy as a central tool around that. But that's going to change very quickly, and let's talk a little bit more about that, I think.
So I'd like you to walk us through the actual put it forward and CMS process. Talk to us a little bit about what you refer to as sensors, target applications, how you would identify data to trigger campaign activity and such.
Sure. I mean, the central premise that we have inside Put It Forward is that the CMS is a core component of engagement, naturally, because that's where the content is being served from. What we do inside Put It Forward is we kind of overlay the sensor network, which is basically a listening network, an engagement network on top of the content, right? And that allows us to do, kind of fun things to say, oh, okay, hey, a piece of content is going out to Jim because we know this, because you've been cookied or identified or what have you. But then as we're watching that piece of content, we say, oh, okay, Jim's opened it 3 times. There's an interesting metric. Oh, he's actually gone this deep the first time. The second time he went this deep, or he picked up where he left off. And you can kind of track and start to understand, the depth of engagement in a piece of content. Or maybe you went to the index and you said, oh, here's a keyword I'm looking for. Then you scrolled up and went to a particular section. And so what we do there is we deploy that sensor network to essentially start feeding us information, and Put It Forward on the backside of that is listening, right? It's listening for all that telemetry and all that data that's coming back. It's not like, listening to, what you may be searching on, or the keywords, or where you listen to and hovered on a specific, hovered over a particular, piece of information in a document per se. But it is, tracking to see, okay, hey, how you've opened, how you've engaged, and so forth. And then what that does, depending on some business rules that you can configure inside of Put It Forward, it will trigger an outcome, right? And that trigger may be, he's heavily engaged on this, so maybe he wants a lookalike or a similar piece of content or so on. And the converse can be true too. Maybe you're not engaged on it, so maybe we should send something that's similar to it to see if that, piques your interest, as it were. Now, all that telemetry data can be stored inside Put It Forward, or we can pipe it through to your analytics engine and so on. But then generally what we're doing is there's an AI component inside of this as well, or an algorithmic component of this as well, which is overlaid on that data as it's flowing through to start identifying correlations and actions that may be of interest to the marketer around your particular level of engagement.
And that's where Copilot could come in to help support the marketer, for example.
Sure, absolutely. The Put It Forward Delphi, which is the Copilot function that helps identify, the correlations between, millions and thousands and et cetera, large activity data sets to say, hey, this is an interesting, set of behaviors this individual is exhibiting because it's similar or indicates, a certain type of sentiment or propensity to do something next.
Talk to me very briefly about your sensors. Can they operate in the cookieless world, and are they compliant to GDPR, CCPA, et cetera?
I'll answer the second question first. Any type of legislation and how they're particularly used from a governance perspective is up to the organization to, enforce from a policy and practices perspective. So yes, it's compliant with those as long as the organization is using them in a compliant way. So that means you can use them in a lot of different scenarios, depending on what level of compliance or regulatory oversight is required. The first question around cookieless world, I was thinking about a more elegant way to say it, but it's just, in the world where, they may be behind a walled garden, they may be on disconnected devices. The answer is yes, it does work in those. It's really not dependent on cooking at all. It's a different technology approach to solving that problem, where it is really an active listener. And it is a sensor network, just like, you have a sensor on the front car of your bumper, which, or on the bumper of the front of your car, which says, hey, you're getting too close to the person in front of you, or something like that, right? It's a passive listener.
So the results of all of this, obviously, if you could jump into, again, visibility beyond the click, a little bit about engagement, and how personalization or trigger marketing is leveraged using a modern day CMS system in combination with Put It Forward.
Sure, and I'll also speak from the perspective of how people are using it in a very practical sense as well. What we mean by visibility beyond the click is, it's not just a metric of, was it delivered, was it opened, was it forwarded? It's what did the individual or individuals do once they clicked, right? Did they engage with it? How far did they go into it? And think about this in the context of, you have an organization that, sometimes you could easily spend tens of thousands of dollars creating a high value asset, a white paper, an information piece, a research paper, for a particular audience. And it gets piloted out to them, and the site is lost, right? You don't necessarily know what's happening after it's been delivered. And so what we give you is that visibility into, okay, hey, is somebody going into the content? Are they reading it? And so on. And then that helps you inform what level of engagement you are getting around pieces of content. We have customers that, and I don't think this is unique in a lot of large enterprises, that have tens of thousands of pieces of content. Which ones are actually, being used? And what I don't mean by being cycled through a campaign or an engagement process, but actually which ones are being used by the customer. Like, are they getting into it? Are they absorbing that material? Are they getting a benefit from it, and so on? And that telemetry, that information helps you, personalize what you're going to do next, because you can pull that information in and trigger a specific outcome around that, right? Maybe that's an email going to them, or a phone call, or a specific type of information, or something that's a little bit more granular or specialized to that individual.
Thank you for that, Mark. It was really good. So the key takeaways that I got from the session is, one, think beyond the click, optimize content for consumption, very important, and sensors give you a lot more depth of sentiment. Anything else you'd add beyond that?
No, not at all. As you can tell, we do have some thoughts on this, and certainly, you know, things to say around that. I thank you for the time that we had today around it, and I'm happy to continue the conversation at any other time in the future, Jim.
Wonderful. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks again, Mark. A brilliant session, and look forward to chapter 6.
All right. Bye-bye.